Welcome to the inaugural episode for Pyyro TV. I feel very distinguished to be here with Armando Pantoja. He is the CTO for HireMatch, which is a really incredible project that he is going to actually help explain.
Yeah, so HireMatch is a decentralized recruitment platform. So we did the ICO in late 2017. We ended it in January of 2018, and we've been working on the project.
That's incredible. And so something I always like to ask, especially like in the ICO space, because we really know what that looks like today, is what problem does HireMatch solve?
So HireMatch solves the problem of recruiting. So recruiting, a lot of people don't know this, but recruiting is a very intensive, costly, expensive process. So on average, if let's say a job is $100,000, that's the salary, right? So it's 20% of that. That's normally what it costs to acquire one employee. So it'd be $20,000 to acquire an employee that has a salary of $100,000. So it's very costly, and a lot of people don't know that it's very expensive and it's very hard and difficult to do. So HireMatch is going to eliminate those costs. It's going to make it more efficient, and it's going to make it an easier process for everybody.
Wow, that's awesome. And so specifically with HireMatch, is that more for like higher end type of jobs? Can it be for any? How does that really work?
It's the concept and the platform can be used for any job, and we're going to focus on blockchain jobs at first because we feel that industry and those key people will be more likely to use our system, more familiar with cryptocurrency in general, and more apt to use the platform that we're building now.
For sure. And I read an article on LinkedIn actually talked about how in-demand blockchain jobs are in general. I think they're actually in the top 10 for 2018. So I think that's a great spot to start out with, is actually looking for those people in the blockchain space. Do you see that as like a really growing development layer for, let's say, like for college students? Like, are they starting to jump in that space, you think, or they don't see it yet?
The thing about college and universities, they're usually a little bit behind because professors, in most cases, have been professors for 10 or 15 years, so they teach a little bit antiquated standards and programming techniques.
Oh, that's interesting.
With blockchain, it's a little bit ahead of its time. Right now, even now, we're in the very early stages of blockchain technology. So I think the universities take a while to catch up, but eventually, yes, I think there'll be blockchain programs, computer science programs, and there'll be blockchain degree paths that kids can join.
Huh, that's really interesting. So you're talking about blockchain, and I really think every time I do a video, especially with someone who has like the type of expertise that you do in the blockchain space, is what's your simplest definition for blockchain? If you were telling someone who doesn't know anything about it, you're going to explain it to them in 30 seconds.
I would explain it like a Google document. This analogy I use a lot is like a Google document that's spread across many people, and many people edit it, and many people have a copy of it. And that's normally how I explain it.
Oh, I like that. I think that's a really good way to tell it, in the simplest possible way. And what do you feel like is maybe the biggest misconception with blockchain? Because I feel like that word is thrown around so much in the industry now. I can see that smile on your face. Yeah. You see it that way too. What's the biggest misconception?
I think the biggest misconception today is that people feel like blockchain can solve more problems than it actually can.
Interesting.
So it's mostly for blockchain technology is very specific to transactions. So transactions going back and forth or whatever, and people will try to apply it to all these different types of technologies, but it only really works well when it's applied to transactions.
Now, do you mean just financial transactions, or
any
is it
type
more
of
expansive?
Assets, financial assets, transferring documents, deeds to houses, anything like that, where a transfer of property or transfer of knowledge goes from one person to another. Blockchain was made specifically to handle that problem. So I mean, the applications beyond that are pretty difficult to work with that type of technology that's so focused on that specific particular problem.
For sure. So do you feel like it's just like a buzzword that maybe a lot of people try to attach to, whether it's a project to try to raise money or just to try to get more interest in what what they're doing? You think they just kind of add it to the thing?
Yeah, blockchain is thrown into a lot of projects now, even though it's not really, it doesn't really apply well to blockchain technology.
For sure.
These types of new projects or whatever. And it's a way, I think, for people to raise money, and it's a way for people to attract a lot of buzz to their particular projects. So.
Interesting. And so kind of back on HireMatch for just a second, when we talk about ICOs, I feel like so many of them have no finished product, even when they come to the the fundraising phase. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that looked like for you guys and kind of where the status of the project is coming to now?
Yeah, I believe that when in the ICO craze of 2017, people were just trying to get out there as fast as possible because there was a lot of competition
And a lot of interest.
Yeah, a lot of interest and a lot of competition to get the contributors, cryptocurrency or whatever your preferred method of raising funds was. And I think that it was just a rush to get something out there, a concept, a white paper, or whatever. And then as the industry matured, late 2017, early 2018, you needed an actual demo out there.
Yeah.
And I believe people started to do that too. But when we started out, we were already about 10-20% done. We had a workable demo. We had all our UI was completed, and we were already at a good point when we started our ICO. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve back then.
Wow, I think that's neat to see, especially in the space, because I feel like so many people, kind of like you were saying, just came to the market with whatever they could to just try to raise funds as fast as possible, and then kind of scrambled after the fundraising phase to say, okay, now how do we actually execute this incredible concept, whatever it is? And I think many of them had, idealistic and lofty goals, which is great, but they should have never been in the fundraising phase like before that. And most of them, I think, went in there with pretty much zero legal protection. They didn't talk to a single lawyer. You know what I mean?
There were a lot of people. It was one ICO. I'm not going to mention the name because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but it was one ICO where the CTO was working at Best Buy the year before. So there's no way he could guide a project of that size and of that magnitude with that many funds to completion. There's no way. You have to have 10, sometimes 15 years experience to be able to do something like that. Technology is very difficult. Even in the normal technology space like Coca-Cola, Fortune 500 companies or whatever, half of projects fail completely, never get to market.
Yeah.
And the other half make it, or they don't meet the time requirement, or they go over budget, or they never come to market at all. And that's half of projects.
Interesting.
And that's something that's common in IT projects, so it's well known that happens. And a lot of people got into it and they thought, well, with enough money, we can do anything.
Yeah,
right?
we could just make it appear. You know what I mean?
No, it doesn't work like that.
That's it.
So it's very, it seems simple, but it's not as simple as you think it is. When you're working with multiple developers, you have different personalities, you have different people, different objectives. You have to have somebody project manage. You have to have a CTO that knows what he's doing and understands the underlying technology. You have to have a lot of pieces in place in order to make a technology project actually reach its goal.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think that makes perfect sense. And then something else you mentioned that I really want to touch on is, you mentioned that blockchain and cryptocurrency is in its very early phase right now. It's kind of, I think it just passed, maybe it's like Wild West phase where everything was going insane and no one maybe had any idea what the regulation was going to look like or where it was going to move or anything like that. So speaking specifically about cryptocurrency, what do you see as the biggest roadblock for cryptocurrency moving forward?
The biggest roadblock, I think, is the current infrastructure now. Companies, and if you go, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you go to an airport and you look behind the counter, you see that what they're using. They're using old command line type applications.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why they use that is because 30 years ago, or whatever, Delta or whatever, JetBlue or whatever, spent hundreds of millions on that application. So it's very difficult if it works. It's not hurting anybody. Everybody understands it.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to move past that.
And probably costly. It's probably extremely costly for the companies.
Also,
And so, prospectively, so you think it's the infrastructure is what cryptocurrency is missing right now to kind of expand outside?
Exactly. Like if banks are making a lot of money using what they're doing right now, it's going to be very difficult for them to accept something new unless they're forced to.
Sure.
Unless the market dynamics make them move forward.
Demand it, or
there's a lot more profit to be made. Something has to move them from where they are now. And people in general are just like that. They're very comfortable.
They're very stuck in their ways and kind of stuck in whatever they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think, at least for me prospectively, I think you need that adoption so that adoption will bring the demand, and then the demand will then in turn have these companies get excited about cryptocurrency, blockchain, and then more of them will kind of pour into that space once they feel that demand from consumers, which I don't think we quite have yet.
I don't think that's there yet.
Yeah.
It takes a long. I mean, if you look back at the history of the internet, internet started to become mainstream around 1992, 93. Internet didn't really become 100% mainstream until like the mid to 2005, 2004. That's when everybody had it in their house. That's when everybody had phones that they can connect to. Even in 2005, everybody didn't have internet.
For sure.
It took later to like 2007, 2008, 2009 for that to be part of cell phone packages.
Yeah.
You had to pay a lot extra for that back then. So I think that with time, it takes time for any new type of
Yeah.
technology to reach that point of mass consumer adoption. And it's just time,
Yeah.
So I think we're like in the early stages around like 94, 95.
Yeah.
If you compare it to the internet and where we are now with blockchain.
No, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it too. When you think about like scalability, so like what is actually going to move this industry forward, I think it's kind of interesting to me to see a lot of these big financial analysts or people on TV that talk about cryptocurrency in this very like short brevity type of motion where they'll speak about it like in passing terms. They're like, oh yeah, it's a fad, or it doesn't do anything. And so for me, usually I think that comes from ignorance. They essentially haven't looked deep enough into it to actually understand it, or it's a competing interest to them. Whatever industry or project that they're working on currently would not support that type of infrastructure. They could lose a ton of money by supporting that or getting involved in that. So I think it's interesting when you see these big people, and I don't need to name any of them, you know who they are, but to hear them bash, whether it's cryptocurrency or blockchain, I think it's interesting to see that. Do you see that as like a dinosaur mentality?
Exactly. I mean, like back to the analogy of the internet, right? So if you go back to the early stages, 92, 93, 94, in the internet, when the internet became more mainstream, people were saying it was a fad.
Yeah.
People said it would never end. People thought that it was something that was just temporary, something that people, had fun with or whatever. A lot of the people that were big players back then in different types of technology and other businesses, they thought that it would never get to the point it got today. So it happens every time there's a new technology. People always, the car, go back to the early 1900s.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they used to look at people who first got the car like they were crazy,
exactly.
Right? Like, oh my gosh, that person's so dangerous, they're gonna kill themselves.
The car
or
would never. They said when Henry Ford was building the first Model T,
yep.
They said it would never. People would never drive. People would prefer to horse and carriages.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So I mean, it happens every time there's a new technology. You have the base players that want to keep everything the way they are because
yep.
that's the way they make their money.
Yep.
And then you have
innovators,
innovators
yep.
that push past that. So it takes a while for that gap to close.
That's pretty interesting to see. I don't know if you've ever seen this interview. There's like a Today Show interview back in like the early 90s where they were talking about the internet. And it was like Al Roker and Katie Couric, and they were like so they were like off camera, like it wasn't like supposed to be filmed. I'm like, what is the internet? And they're like, no, it's the www. That's the internet. And the one person's like, no, isn't it the @ symbol? And they're like, no, that's email. And it was amazing to hear them talk about it. But then like now, it's not even like a question of the language of how the internet works. Everyone doesn't get how the internet works, but they use it like on a daily basis. So I feel like that's what cryptocurrency is going to look like in the future. Is it's just going to get adopted in the same sense. Like people cannot explain how the internet works. Most people really can't, but they're going to use it on a daily basis.
Exactly.
So I think it's just like that.
I agree with you on that. I think that, like I said, when a technology grows is when it disappears. The internet everybody was talking about it in the 90s. Everybody was talking about what's going to happen, how it's going to change. It disappeared.
Because it just became a part of life,
you're saying? It became a part of life.
That's interesting.
So that's when all the major growth happened. That's when now we use Uber. Now we use Facebook. Now
yep.
we have apps on our phone. Now we have internet-connected devices. That's that time period between 2000 and 2010 when it disappeared and went away and nobody realized what was happening is when most of the growth happened. That's when blockchain, when people...
Stop talking about
exactly,
it. Exactly.
When all the hype
yeah.
and all this stuff is over, and in that 10-year period is where most of the growth is going to happen.
Wow,
and
that's
blockchain will be integrated in all of our, everything that we do it'll be some way integrated with blockchain.
I like this. I'm just gonna wait for it to start going quiet, and then that's when I know we've made it.
That's what I believe.
So I just really have one last question. So I know you've spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico. You lived there at one time.
Yeah.
You used to play professional basketball, correct?
Yeah, I did.
So Puerto Rico is kind of an interesting space in the cryptocurrency. It's kind of become this like hub, this little small crypto valley. And so do you see a big future for Puerto Rico as it pertains to cryptocurrency and blockchain?
The thing about Puerto Rico, they just, you say about 2 years ago that they started, they did a tax,
the tax breaks and things like that,
right?
Now it's just there, yeah.
Instead of paying like 18% or whatever the tax rate is here, you can go to Puerto Rico and be exempt from federal taxes and pay 4%. So it was a big incentive to move down there early. I mean, what happened is that the hurricane happened, you know? And that hurricane, it kind of like ruined the infrastructure. So it's hard for technology companies to go down there.
It kind of has to come back and rebuild first before it has a chance to get there.
Yeah, but I believe Puerto Rico could be a big a place for a lot of crypto entrepreneurs to get started. I think it's a good opportunity to go down there. It's a beautiful island, and I love it down there. But
yeah, no, I think it could be big, and I could see there's some different areas. So whether it's there's a few different islands that are kind of competing in that space. Well, you have like Switzerland and some different parts in Asia that you could see they're starting to try to develop those cryptocurrency valleys, those cryptocurrency hubs. So I think it'll be interesting, in the next 5 to 10 years, who kind of takes that mantle, who really runs with it, because I think it could be massive for whatever country or city or thing like that is really doing it. It's just a question of kind of who gets there first and who really builds it out right.
And that's what scares me with the U.S. because we have to be careful. We can't over-regulate this. We can't put too many laws and restrictions, and because what happened is that just like anything else, people are going to go to the path of least resistance.
Sure.
So a company will be less likely to start in a country that's all too many regulations, too many laws. They'll go somewhere else. So America or the United States has to be very careful in how we go forward with this. We want to make sure we bring entrepreneurs here. We want to make sure we don't push them away. So we have to make sure that we create an environment where people that do have blockchain projects or whatever will come here and feel safe and secure.
And I think it also stifles like innovation and creativity as well. Even forget the monetary side of things. Those people are going to go other places, and then you have to talk about things like intellectual capital. So are these other countries in their education systems, are they going to start developing blockchain faster than we're doing it? And so that their kind of collegiate people that are coming up are going to have a much better hand on this than say people in the United States do.
Yeah, I believe so. If we're not careful in the next 5 to 10 years, if we don't protect this industry within our own borders, make sure it's well funded, make sure we have the right education system for it, we could fall behind. So we have to be very careful in how we look at this and how we treat it in the next few years.
And especially if you think it's going to be a future, like we want to be a part of that future. So I think we've got to kind of start moving with the times a little bit, or we could easily get left behind.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thank you so much for being on Pyyro TV. I really appreciate it. Where can they find more information about Hire Match?
Hire Match is on. We have our website hirematch.io. We have a Facebook group /HireMatch.io. And we have a LinkedIn group. So if you guys just search for us there, there's plenty of information.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the first episode of Pyyro TV. I'm sure we'll have you back on real soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.